Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of my Deputy Convener and myself, I'd like to give you a warm welcome to Falkirk Council's Planning Committee, the first of the new session. Now we have a number of new councillors that are on the committee, and I'm quite sure they went through their training and they're going to enjoy the experience of one of the major committees within this council. This meeting will be held in the Lesser Town Hall in accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003. It's been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. In accordance with Section 50 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, the public are excluded from this meeting, as it is likely that if members of the public were present, there would be a real and substantial risk to the public health due to infection or contamination with coronavirus. This meeting will be live streamed. We'll go to the business in the agenda. First of all, can I ask if there's any apologies?
Thank you, Convener. No apologies have been submitted.
Thank you for that. That takes us to item 2 on your agenda, which is declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have any declarations of interest at this time? Councillor Colley got her hand raised. Councillor Colley.
Thank you, Convener. This is in relation to item 8 on our agenda. I've had a communication from both the objector and later on the applicant on this application, having regard to the objective test in the Councillors' Code of Conduct, and bearing in mind this is my first meeting, erring on the side of caution, I consider there could potentially be a perception that I might have predetermined the matter. I would accordingly declare an interest in the matter, and will leave this item, leave the meeting after this item of business.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Colley. Any other declarations of interest at this time? None. Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 3, which is a minute of meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 8th of April 2022. It's pages 3 to 5. Any questions arising from this minute, or can we agree the minute? Agreed. Fine, thank you very much. That takes us to item 4. Formation of landscape display area, erection of office buildings, storage building, car parking and associated infrastructure at Klondike Garden Centre, Burnside Nursery, Falkirk for Klondike Group. The report is by Julie Seidel-Gregory and it's pages 6 to 19 on your agenda papers. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. Bernard, please can you show the composite plan for this one and then the photographs if you're able to. This application relates to the formation of a landscape display area with office, storage building and parking at Klondike Garden Centre, Pullman. The application site is currently occupied in part by the landscape business who have operated from the site for a number of years. To the west of the site, in the area where you can see there's going to be a display area, there was a dwelling house which has now been demolished. All of the application site has planning permission to form car parking and landscaping associated with the redevelopment of Klondike Garden Centre. Provision was made at the outset to accommodate the landscape business within the main garden centre building, but they now wish to maintain a presence at the front of the site. No objections or issues of concern are raised in principle by consultees. This includes the Council's flooding team and SEPA with specific reference to flooding and drainage. It should be noted that for this application, the applicant submitted up-to-date hydraulic modelling report, flood risk assessment, addendum to flood risk assessment and overland flow path analysis, which specifically evaluated flood risk both within and out with the application site. 2 objections were received as detailed in section 6 of your report. The objections are addressed in section 7b.2 of the report. This application is assessed as being in accordance with the development plan. The full policy assessment as detailed in section 7a.1 to 7a.10 of the report, and it's considered that there are no material planning considerations which have been identified which outweigh the development plan and would justify the refusing planning permission in this instance. It's recommended that the Planning Committee grant planning permission subject to conditions contained in the report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Julie. We're going to open it up for members. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Provost. Ex-Provost. Convener. A couple of questions. I see from the drawing, is there a suds pond in this development? Because it's a big development for not to have a suds pond.
Julie.
Thank you. This specific application deals only with the landscape display area to the front of the site, which does not include a suds pond, but there were drainage proposals which were considered as part of the wider redevelopment of the Klondike Garden Centre, which dates back to 2017.
Right, thanks, Julie. With regards to the flooding, and we state that there is no issue with flooding. I can remember it being highlighted in local press about cars nearly floating in the area. Has that been addressed, or will that still happen for flooding?
Convener, I'm wondering if this might be better directed to our flooding representative that we have here today, Gary McGregor.
Yes, indeed. Mr McGregor, would you like to come in on that point, Councillor Kerr?
Yep, morning. Thanks, Convener. Gary McGregor, Roads, Bridges and Flooding Coordinator at Falkirk Council. So I can confirm that we have had a 2021 flood risk assessment of the area, and there is a flood risk at the area. However, there is no increased flood risk due to the proposals on this plan application.
Councillor Kerr.
So Gary, what you're saying is there is a flood risk in the area, but this application doesn't increase it?
Yes. So there is a flood risk in the area, in the red line boundary of the site. However, the application proposals does not increase that flood risk. So
all the water that's going to be taken from this new development, where's that going to go? Just the same drains as everybody else?
So I think like Julie had mentioned, Councillor, there is a drainage strategy that was previously approved in 2017, 2018 applications. I think you'd mentioned SUDS previously. I think there was a design for a soakaway design for the drainage system. And you know that the basis is that there is no increased flood risk in that area to this site and the red line boundary.
Thanks, Gary. I'm concerned with the amount of water that lies there when it's heavy rain, and if we're saying that this isn't going to increase in that, we need to find a way where that doesn't happen all the time. And I don't know if it's this application or if it's not this application, but it can't keep on flooding the way it floods when it's heavy rain.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Councillor. I think probably out with this planning committee, but we need to look at the bigger picture in that area as well. So obviously I just want to focus on this plan application, and I've commented on that, but I think there is obviously larger issues down in that application.
Yeah. That's all I know, Convener. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
Could I say that having lived in the area almost all my life, the flooding that has occurred has not occurred near the red line areas there. It has actually occurred at the motel. That is where the cars were reported flooding and floating about, which is, it's near, but it's not in the area of the actual red line area, the proposed area.
Okay. Thank you. Just on that point about the flooding, First of all, my own personal view of this site is that it's been overdeveloped. And I remember when I was the provost, I went one Sunday to Pullman Cemetery for an event. We were early, so we went down there to park, and that was the time that Councillor Kerr had said it wasn't just the papers that was involved. It was it was on TV that evening when people were waist high. They reckon it was caused by the fact is that they had raised the height levels, and that caused the flooding that came down into the area where it was. My own personal view is obviously we've got a number of new councillors here that haven't been involved in this application or previous applications, and I think it would be justified that we actually go out on site and have a look. And also I'd like to see an updated report from SEPA on that major issue, the flooding. But I think it would be advantageous for everybody before we take a decision on this that we go on site. So I'll formally move sites.
I'll second that, convener.
Thank you, Provost. I think Councillor Murtagh wants in. Did you want in, Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, I mean,
thank you.
I appreciate what you're saying there, convener, in terms of, especially with new councillors maybe wanting to go to site. I think this probably is a location that is fairly well known in the passing. I think certainly. I suppose in terms of from a planning perspective here, and I do appreciate, and I think we've all witnessed the flooding at that location, and certainly flooding is something which I take very seriously, not least because of the experiences in my own ward. But what I'm reading from the report and from what the officers have said is that there's already, I mean, effectively, there is already permission here. There's already a development here. What's proposed here is not going to alter the risk in terms of, like from what is already there. What I'm picking up is from what is already there, if what is already there is changed to being what is in this proposal, then there's going to be no greater or lesser risk in terms of flooding to that area. And I don't disagree, and I think, as the flooding officer said, that there needs to be much wider discussion about the issue of flooding in the area and more exploration of those issues generally. But in terms of this planning application, I'm not sure that there is any, if that's the evidence which officers are coming to us with, and there has been the flood risk assessment on it, I'm not sure on what grounds there are to hold up any further in that sense, because I'm not sure what's going to change. If that material situation is not going to change from officers, then I'm not sure where it leaves the committee. I wonder whether maybe officers could just confirm if that interpretation of what I'm saying is correct, that in effect what's there already, it's not an unoccupied site, what's there already in terms of the landscape business, what's proposed, that is in effect. It's not like it's going to increase risk or decrease risk, and just kind of give a comment on that and where that's maybe likely to change if there was further report or whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you. Will that be Julie coming back in?
Thank you, convener. I think what Councillor Murtagh has concluded there is quite right. Yes, there is heavy development in this area, but it's development in the most part on this application site, which has the benefit of planning permission. At the moment, the redevelopment of the Klondike Garden Centre is almost complete. The last area to complete is this area across the frontage, and they have planning permission for that to be a large area of car park at a higher level. This current application would see the levels being dropped to that more similar to what it was when there was a dwelling house there. In line with the up-to-date flood risk analysis that's came in, and the conclusions of that from SEPA and our flooding team is that there would be no increased risk of flood either within the application site or out with the application site as a consequence of development. I'm aware of the flooding events that we've had at the Premier Inn, and I'm also aware that the council's looking more widely at flooding, in particular as part of the Grangemouth flood prevention scheme that may impact flooding in this area. So, I think Councillor Murtagh has concluded that quite succinctly there, but I note the comments that new members might also want to look at the site.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Murtagh, you get hand up, you want back in here?
Yeah, it's just, I suppose the thing is, if it's already got permission for parking in effect, you know, in an area just was complete hard standing and then parking there. I don't see how that and leaving, if we didn't, you know, if we ended up not approving this application, which is what the business want to do and create and enhance, and I'm not going to make an opinion whether I think that would be an improvement to additional car parking or not, but in terms of the risk to flooding, which seems to be the main concern of members here, I'm not sure that's necessarily a kind of logical fit of saying, well, if we were to explore it further and end up going to refusal, that's going to be any better from the flooding, and particularly if, you know, you then end up with even more cars parked in an area of complete hard standing. I'm not going to make a judgment that I think what was proposed would be better for the flooding, because I'm not qualified to do so, but it certainly doesn't seem to me, even on the balance of what's been said, that will make it any worse. So if the committee really want to go to sites, then you know, that's up to you. I mean, that's fine if that's the consensus. I'm not going to say that I'm vehemently against that. I think it's probably unnecessary in prolonging it. And my own view would be that I don't think there's grounds for refusal, but I don't want to move. I don't want to move against your sites, convener. If the committee feels strongly that it would like to visit it, that's fair enough. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Any other members like to come in at this stage? Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. And as much as in a lot of site visits there has been value in them, I don't see the value. I'm sorry, I don't see the value in the site visit here. We're talking about flooding. The flooding officer has said it won't add to it. There's already development on there. I don't see what decision there is to be made by seeing a site which we're already told is and I think a good number of us already know the area. We know there's a flooding problem in the area. This won't add to it. I respectfully don't see the value. I do see value in site visits in certain ones. I don't see it in this one. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the site visit, I would be moving to accept the officer's recommendations on this. There's probably other ones that I would be quite happy to see a site visit. I just don't see the value in a site visit on this, and I'm not in any way being disrespectful to anybody. In this one, I don't see. I don't know that the new members will particularly see anything, because all they'll go and see is a bit of land, and they'll be told there's a flooding risk. As the flooding expert has already told us, there's probably better use of the committee's time if there is sites that will get more value from seeing. Okay. So I'm not for going to a site visit mission.
Fine, that's fine. And for new members, I think you'll appreciate this is your first meeting, but everybody gets an opportunity to speak, and everybody has an opinion. And it's an opportunity now for any other member to come in just to clarify where we are. We have a motion moved and seconded to go on a site visit. As I said at the beginning, I've not just got a problem with the flooding issues, because I've seen it for myself, but I think that the site is overdeveloped. That's another issue. But if any other member would like to come in at this stage, thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
I'm going to give a perspective of a new member, considering there's been a couple of comments on how new members might feel. Yeah. I think the report in front of us and the information that's been given by the officers seems pretty straightforward to me. I think everybody in the room is probably aware of the significant flooding issues at the Pullman Burn that we've seen a couple of years ago, with flash flooding and issues at the hotel at the Premier and just there. But for me, I think it seems pretty straightforward, and I would concur with my colleagues, Councillor Bowes and Councillor Murtagh. I don't think there's any need for a site visit. I think if there was a compromise where there were the ability to get photographs brought back to the committee, or if there were photographs available right at this moment, that would be fine. But I think I would be minded to look at this now rather than hold it up any longer. I think that's okay. So do you want to formally put an amendment to the motion that you're happy with the recommendations? I think that's maybe in my newness, I might not fully understand that. However, I'd be happy to. Go back to Councillor Bowes. Okay, Councillor Bowes.
Convener, thank you. I'm happy to put an amendment that we continue to go through and make a decision on this. I'm quite happy to propose the officer's recommendations if you wish.
And
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
that's fine. Okay, so just to clarify again, we have a motion moved and seconded to go on a site visit. We now have an amendment to agree the recommendations contained within the report. Councillor Steen. Thank you, sir.
Just a question to yourself, convener, and also to the provost, perhaps because of your experience, perhaps to illustrate what value in showing potentially, as you say, overdevelopment or flood risk, especially considering I'm not sure there will be much identifiable evidence of flood risk, especially during the summer months at the moment. What value you find or the provost would find in a site visit, just to potentially illustrate how new members who might not have the experience would view this situation?
That's a good question. The first part of my motion was the fact is that I believe that the site was overdeveloped, and I think that going on a site visit, you'll be standing there, you'll see the site and what's on the site at the moment, and then you'll be able to visualise what this new application would do to that site. That would be my main reason in relation to the site visit, just to see that the site has been overdeveloped. But you can't say it's overdeveloped from here, because obviously, although you've got drawings, you can't physically understand what changes would be in that location unless you're on site. That's the simplicity of it.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, Councillor Murtagh, you want back in?
Yeah, and I suppose I can see Ian Henderson sitting next to you, who I'm sure will keep us straight and collecting about how we consider a substantive procedural motion, which is sites, versus a recommendation motion, which obviously is what Councillor Bowes and myself have put forward. So I presume then that we'll have to vote on sort of basically for or against sites, and then considering the matter of what decision we make. But I just wanted to say, from that point of view, just to come in on that last point, I suppose, and I'm not maybe stating a view about whether I think there's overdevelopment there or not. I think for the benefit of well, for everybody, but you know, in my mind, when I'm considering and looking at it, whether it is currently overdeveloped or not is not what is in our gift to decide. What we've got to decide on is the proposal that's before us. If we can either grant it or you know, not grant it. If we don't grant it, it doesn't change the situation of whether it's overdeveloped in the first place. It just changes what we're being asked to decide on is the nature of the development that's there. And if we do nothing, then you know what's been said is that there's already the permission for the car parking there. It's already developed as it is, even if nothing happened with it. So it's kind of neither here nor there from that point of view. And I think that I'm always find it useful when officers will direct us to what the decision before us is and the consequences of what we're being asked to decide on. And I think that's quite clear in this case. So I think it's not necessarily part of the debate in my mind in terms of going to sites to see that.
Okay, as I've said before, and I'll say throughout the session, everybody is entitled to their opinion, including yourself, Councillor. Okay, then we'll have a motion moved and seconded to go to sites. We have an amendment to go with the recommendation contained within the report. I'll go to Mr. Henderson now just to clarify the legality.
Thank you, convener. And perhaps I could just seek some clarification on a point also in terms of the motion. Would it be anticipated that the site visit would purely be to see the physical characteristics of the site?
Indeed.
Thank you, convener. And Councillor Murtagh was correct. We have a provision in our standing orders which doesn't pit a procedural motion against a substantive motion. So what the standing orders provide is that we would first of all consider the procedural motion, which was a motion by the convener, Councillor Buchanan, seconded by Provost Bissett, to visit the site to see the physical characteristics. And I also noted there was a request for officers to seek an updated report from SEPA.
Yeah.
So what we would do at this point is have a vote for or against a site visit. If the vote is for a site visit would take place. If the vote was not to have a site visit, then the amendment by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Murtagh, would then become the substantive motion that would then form the basis of further discussion by the committee. So on that basis, it is a for or against the motion, which is to have a site visit and further information from SEPA. So I'll run over the councillors' names by way of roll call. So Councillor Buchanan.
For.
Councillor Kelly.
For.
And Provost Bissett.
For.
And Councillor Bowes.
Against.
And I think Councillor Brown is absent. Councillor Colley.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. Councillor Forrest.
Again.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Murtagh.
Against.
Councillor Redmond is not in the meeting at this point. Councillor Sinclair.
Against.
And Councillor Steinbank.
For.
We have an equality of votes, 5 for a site visit and 5 against having a site visit. And on that basis, the convener would be able to exercise a casting vote.
Thank you for that. For.
On that basis, the motion for the site visit is carried. Thank you, convener.
Thank you for that. That takes us to item 5 on your agenda papers today. Construction of warehouse and formation of canopy at Klondike Garden Centre, Burnside Nursery, Falkirk for Klondike Group. The report is by Julie Seidel Gregory again, and it's pages 20 to 31 on your agenda papers. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, convener. Bernard, can you show some of the plans and photographs for this application, please? This is another application for Klondike Garden Centre. It relates to the installation of a canopy and a storage building. The proposed canopy would cover a paved area to the rear of the main garden centre building, and the proposed storage building would replace a number of temporary buildings in the established yard area. The fabric of the main building, including parking, access to the site, would be unaffected by development. No objections or issues of concern have been raised by consultees in relation to this application. This includes the Roads Development Unit, Environmental Protection Unit, Council's Flooding Team, Museum Services, SEPA and Historic Environment Scotland. SEPA comment that this is a low risk proposal and that it's in areas of the site which are not at risk from flooding. 2 objections were received to the application as detailed in section 6 of the report. The objections are assessed in section 7b.2 to 7b.4 of the report. The application is assessed as being in accordance with the development plan. The full policy assessment is detailed in section 7a.1 to 7a.7 of the report. And no material planning considerations have been identified which outweigh the terms of the development plan, and it is considered would justify refusing planning permission in this instance. As such, it's recommended that the Planning Committee grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Julie. I'm going to open it right up by saying that if you go to page 21 in your agenda papers, you will see for the reason for committee consideration. There's an opportunity when the weekly lists come out that members feel justified, they can call in, but they need to ensure they have a relative planning justification. Now, if you look at 2.1, it says reason for committee consideration. The application was called in for determination by the planning committee by Councillor Buchanan to allow the planning committee to consider the size and scale of development proposed and consider if there are potential impacts in relation to flooding. So I'm just going to repeat what I said at the previous application. I'm going to formally move, because we're already going there, that we go to sites with this one as well, because once again, this area, this complete area, has been overdeveloped, and other potential applications, if they're granted, will exacerbate the problems that we have just now with flooding. Because the fact is that although the professionals are the officers and planning officers, that once again it's up to every individual to recognise how they feel about the potential of an application. And don't be afraid to, it doesn't matter what anybody says, don't be afraid to give your opinion at committee. And my opinion quite clearly is this site is overwhelmingly overdeveloped, and any other application that was granted would exacerbate the flooding problem there. So I'm going to formally move right away that we go to sites with this one as well. Thank you. Councillor Bissett.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Provost, sorry, Provost. Thank you.
It makes sense that we're already going a site visit and we can include this at the same time. So I think the two of them together makes absolute sense.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Murtagh, then Councillor Bowes.
Thanks, Provost, and as you, sorry, Convener, and as you say, you know, we all have our opinion, we're all entitled to it, and I'll respect everybody's opinion on the committee, certainly. I won't waste the committee's time by repeating the previous remarks, however, I do think it's the similar to the previous application, and I do think that I don't see that there's a point in you know, putting it to a vote, given that it is likely to, we were going there anyway. But I do think we need to be mindful of the best use of the committee's time always as well. I'm not criticising, but I do think that or officers' time, and I know that the, you know, cost of plan applications, cost time, you know, is something which we're all concerned about too, and we need to get the right decision, absolutely. But I'm slightly concerned that what that information is going to input to the eventual decision making, balancing in the report, and that obviously we have long agendas to consider and get through to get to the right decision. So I just wanted to make that point and refer to the remarks I made previously. Thanks, Provost.
No, thank you for your input again, Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Bowes.
Agree with Councillor Murtagh. This is a simple application, but we're already going. I understand that I'm not going to push into a vote. But if we're going to go to site visits for simple applications, it's going to take up a lot of officer time, which is obviously a cost to the council as well as our own time. I appreciate that, as you say, everybody's allowed their own opinion. My opinion is this is quite a simple one. Could have dealt with quite easily today, but I won't vote against.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. Councillor Colley.
Yes, thank you. I mean, as I said, as my colleagues have said, I think that obviously we're going to sites anyway in relation to the earlier application, but and I just wanted to ask officers about this because I just wanted to be clear that I understood it. The previous application appeared to be work that involved demolishing and developing in effect an area that was less developed, whereas this one here seems to be about consolidating buildings and the buildings that are already there into one area and covering it with a canopy. So it seems to me to be a little bit different in terms of what it's asking for approval for, and I'm just checking that I've understood that this, to me, this seems like a different application, in that it's saying it's it replaces a number of temporary buildings in the working yard, and the main building, parking, access, etc., is unaffected. So, you know, to me, I'm less certain about the first one, but about this one does seem relatively simple. But obviously, if there's a decision around going to sites already, then I'm not going to vote against that either. But I just wanted to double check that my understanding of that's probably, I hope I was clear enough there.
You were. We'll maybe bring Julie back in there just to clarify what you've been saying.
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and you make a very interesting point there. Yes and no. The area that we've just been discussing for Cartmore building supplies across the frontage of the site, did have a dwelling house there, which was there for a number of years, and the landscape business, which is currently on site. So I would argue that it was equally as developed. The main difference is that the area across the frontage of the site is a high risk flood area, which is more prone to flooding. The areas that relate to this application are low risk, and we did have a meeting with SEPA and their flooding representatives to discuss this in detail. But as you rightly say, Councillor, it is a consolidation of development to the rear of the site. They've got a working yard area, which has a number of temporary buildings. There's containers and quite unattractive temporary buildings which are being used for storage purposes. This building will give a modern and a more usable space for storage, and the canopy to the rear of the building is just to cover an area of hard standing which is already in place.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll just clarify where we are, everybody in the committee. We have a motion moved by myself, seconded by the Provost, to go to sites. Is there anybody otherwise minded? No? Okay, agreed to sites, thank you. That takes us to item 6 on your agenda this morning. It's erection of 6 dwelling houses at land to the north of Aldi, Green Park Drive, Pullman, for ABN Developments. It's pages 32 to 56. Now, an application has been made by representatives for the applicant, Philip Neves and Stephen Mile, to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of this item of business. In accordance with Standing Order 33.5, the committee shall decide whether to hear the deputation. Now, the report will be by Mr. Donald Campbell, but before Mr. Campbell gives us a report, I've got to ask the committee, is everybody quite happy to hear the representatives for the applicant? We agreed that? We've agreed that, fine, thank you very much. There's now an opportunity for the report by our officer, Mr. Donald Campbell. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you, Convener. Morning, Councillors. I'm Donald Campbell from Development Management. What I intend doing is doing a brief overview of the application, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. This application is adjacent to the Aldi store in Pullman. It's an area of wooded open space. Access would be proposed via Appin Grove, and it's proposed that the road servicing this development would not be an adopted highway. We've got a number of photographs and plans. Bernard's just showing the general location plan. As you can see, it's to the north of the Aldi store. The block plan, if you could show that, Bernard, it shows the layout of 6 detached 2-storey dwelling houses. I think I can see from the file that during the course of this application, the application's evolved a little bit through discussion with the applicant and through consultation. The application is supported by a number of documents that are detailed in 1.3 of the report, and the officers dealing with the application carried out consultation with colleagues on that, to the extent that we don't have any objections from any consultees on the application. However, it's fair to say that this development has created quite a lot of local interest, and we have objections from the Community Council, and there's also in excess of 50 representations on the application. In summary, these refer to the loss of the woodland, the loss of the open space, the access to it, traffic concerns, overlooking. They're all detailed in 5.1 and 6.1 of the report. We have assessed this as officers. We consider that the design and layout is acceptable. There's no requirement for any contributions because the level of development, which is 6 units, I can see from the file originally it was 7 and reduced down to take into account concerns of consultees and residents. Moving on to it, we've recommended that planning permission be granted subject to a number of conditions. I would just point out that there's a small issue in the normal informative relating to time periods and drawing numbers It hasn't been attached to your report, but if members were minded to grant, we would include that on the decision notice, which is standard practice. So with that, I'll leave that just now and let the applicant and his representative address committee. But as I say, more than happy to at least attempt to answer any questions that members have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. There's now an opportunity for the applicant's representatives to speak. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. Once you've spoken, then there'll be an opportunity for committee members to ask any questions. But first of all, could you introduce yourselves? Is it one or is it two that's going to be speaking?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Apologies, I'm dialing in from down in London today. So my name's Stephen Miles. I am essentially the applicant for the project, acting in capacity as both the client, but actually also the architect for the proposal as well. So I can hopefully speak in both capacities to the committee today.
Okay, thank you. And your colleague beside you, who's Mr. Neves?
Good morning, convener. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to help Stephen and to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, then. Well, it's up to you what way you go, but you've got 10 minutes between you, and then you've got an opportunity for committee members to ask the two of you questions in relation to the application. So your 10 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. If it's okay with the committee, I'll just very quickly put up a quick presentation. I'll go through it as quickly as I can. I hopefully won't speak for the whole 10 minutes, but it will just give us an opportunity just to talk around some of the key elements of the proposal. So if that's okay, I'll just try and pop that on the screen just now. Apologies, Philip. I'm having a bit of trouble sharing from the screen. Is there any chance you could share the presentation that I issued last night?
We're losing you. Obviously,
Stephen, sorry, I'm having trouble too. I think it's probably best if you just give the presentation.
Yeah, that would be better, because obviously your time has started. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry, hold on a second.
There's always a problem with technology, but I would advise maybe one of you started speaking to the application.
I think Stephen has dropped off of the call here, so apologies for that. Just run through details of the proposal. The aim is to facilitate a high quality development of housing within the local area, to promote high quality standards of planning and urban design and placemaking, and create a modern, attractive place to live, to provide a secure, safe and pleasant environment, to create a development which is sustainable and efficient, and to provide housing which is accessible and adaptable by observing housing for varying needs, principles and designing streets, and to meet identified priorities in the local area in terms of need and demand for new housing. Now, I note my colleague Stephen is back on, so Stephen, do you want to carry on from me?
Yeah, sorry, apologies, folks. Apologies, I can't get the screen share. Yeah, so as you know, the site which the office have introduced, it is a piece of leftover land bounded by large elements of residential and just north of the Aldi in Pullman. So ultimately what we're trying to do here is quite simple. We want to create some affordable local family housing. We very much had all the way through the application period. We've been in dialogue with the planning team for around about a year and a half through a formal pre-application, followed up by a very long and detailed application phase. Throughout that, we have been constantly minded of providing something which speaks to local amenity. It speaks to living within a walkable neighbourhood, and it very much speaks to providing high quality local housing, which I think we all recognise, particularly over the last couple of years, as something which is really a high priority coming out of the back of the pandemic, and being able to have that local housing within local communities. There's a bit of planning history that probably isn't obviously available. We, whilst the planning officer's correct, there was quite a few observations. We actually did do a fair amount of community consultation as well. I personally met with Rosie and Michael, the chair, and the design leader from Pullman Community Council on site. At that point, we had prepared a scheme which was 7 units consisting of 7-storey townhouses. Following that discussion, we very much listened. We took on board the observations from the Community Council, which was raised in their initial objections, and we ultimately we amended our scheme on the basis of that. So we reduced the storey down from a typology which they were uncomfortable with, which was the townhouse typology, down to a more traditional detached style of housing. And we also reduced the overall density down from 7 units to 6 units. And furthermore, we also looked to move to a private drive arrangement rather than having a full adopted road solution. So I think it just wanted to note that whilst we know that it has created some local interest, we've certainly not been ignorant of that interest, and we've certainly did our very best throughout the last period to come down and to meet as openly and transparently as we could with the local community and to seek to address those concerns where we could. Everything that we've tried to do within the site is about, trying to create a quality living environment, somewhere that children and families can exist. We have been very keen to make sure that that open space is protected, and through dialogue with the officers, we've got a strategy where the vast majority of that open space will still remain open to the local community for, just for ad hoc use and local dog walking and so on. So I think we very much support that idea, and we've brought in a number of specialist reports from Habitat and Tree, just to make sure that we support that, as well as looking at enhanced provision for landscape around about the site. We worked hard throughout the period to look at the massing of the overall site to make sure that the visual impact of the site was minimised, that we ensured that the overall scale and development was well below the tree canopy, well below the scale of the overall site, and due to the levels on the site and that it sits down into the site, we provided visual amenity images which we would hope demonstrate that these houses will very, very comfortably nestle within the wider surrounding and the context. And given that it is predominantly a residential context at that lower part of the site, we would hope that these are a high quality and complementary addition to the local housing which is in the area. Again, we've strived throughout the application to ensure that we push for high quality materials and a high quality of design. A lot of the design was in line with Falkirk Council's exemplar design guidance, and I took personal care in preparing the designs myself. We went through multiple iterations and again through detailed dialogue with the planning team to make sure that we did bring forward something which was not just about baseline housing. We wanted to bring in something which truly was a high quality offering within the local community and at an affordable level. Clearly, the landscape impact, there's an argument here that this land being left over commercial land could be developed or could have been developed by the landholder at some point for a pseudo commercial use, which would very much have mitigated any opportunity for the local community to continue to use this site. So again, we do hope that committee and recognises that in bringing forward this application, what we're actually hoping to do and striving to do is to actually very much retain a lot of this as a community asset, as opposed to the opposite argument from the local community, which is that we're trying to remove a community asset. If the local land owner decided to turn this into commercial use, there would be no barrier to them gating this off, because it's predominantly in private ownership. So overall, we sort of hope that the merits of the scheme are strong enough for committee to agree. As I said, we've been very thorough, very transparent, and very patient over the last 18 months to make sure that we asked a lot of the rigorous questions of ourselves throughout the process, and that we challenged ourselves to take action when we believed that we could do something which would be more appropriate and more acceptable to the local community. We were very pleased to get the support of the planning team once we brought forward the final proposal. So I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, convener, but I'm unless Phil's got anything else to say, that's probably a fair summary of where we've got to at this point.
Thank you. That's 9 minutes, but we'll give you an extra couple of minutes if your colleague wants to speak due to your problems with technology. Mr. Neves.
Thank you, convener. I don't really have anything to add to what Stephen has said. We've had a very productive working relationship with the planning officers, Mr. Campbell and his team. We've listened to what local people have said and tried to address concerns. We've sought to maintain the open space and the accessibility to the open space. And we believe that we are providing an attractive housing site, which will add to the housing land supply in this area, which is important to make sure the land supply and delivery is kept up. And we commend this site to you and hope that you'll be able to support us today in terms of the planning officer's recommendation. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you both, gentlemen. It's an opportunity now for members of the committee, and just to let everybody know that Councillor Redmond joined us at the start of this application, so he'll be able to take part in it. Now, is there anybody got any questions, first of all, to the applicant and his applicant's agents? Any questions? None? Okay then, thank you very much, gentlemen. Obviously, you'll be sitting in for the rest of the meeting. We'll now an opportunity for committee members to ask our planning officer, Mr. Campbell, if any questions in relation to this application. Councillor Bowes.
You know, this is going to shock you to death, and that this is one which I do believe that a site visit would be better, so we can see the local impact. This is where, for my own personal belief is this is what should be used. I'm not commenting the last two. So I'm going to propose on this one that we go to a site visit so we can see the local impact on houses. It's fine seeing it in writing, it's fine seeing it in drawings, but in this case, and also if we can get as much detail on what trees will be coming down, because it's not all of them, so as much detail on that, so that we can see if there is truly a loss of amenity on it. And I think we will only ever see that on site.
Okay, so you're formally moving sites. And your colleague, Councillor Forrest?
I'd like to second that proposal. Mainly because personally, I used this site many years ago. I was the local scout leader, right, and we used the community centre, and this was nearby, gave a wee sense of wildness about it. I personally cannot see how all of these criteria are going to be met, that the minimum amount of trees taken down, the privacy, etc. And I would really like to see firsthand what the proposals are actually on site. So I second my colleague here.
Okay, quite happy with that. Just to clarify, we have a motion moved and seconded for sites. Councillor Murtagh wanted in here, I believe.
I did. I think that, I mean, and again, if it's useful for members to go to sites, I think probably this one is probably less familiar to others. If we are going to sites and therefore coming back to committee, we'd like some more information about I noted when I was reading the report about the trees and the ratios and the different classifications of trees, and officers were quite happy with the resupply arrangements or what would then be replanted, which is welcome. I know that one of the, because when they're trying to address issues about privacy, it was said about there being a kind of boundary, and that the development is proposed is not over the scale, so that there will still be maintained that privacy. I'm sure I'm not the only councillor who has issues come to them where you've got new developments that are separated by tree lines, and therefore what land, who owns the land, in which the trees, and then it impacts, and so it'd be good if that situation could be clarified if we are coming back for a report, both about the suitability and the types of trees, which I think is noted in the report, but it'd be a good bit more clarity, but about that ownership and dividing and any potential condition that might need to be put on, so that we can have peace and harmony between neighbouring developments should it get to that stage, if that's okay. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thanks again for your input. Mr. Campbell, to do your hand up, want to come in at this stage?
Yes, I had my virtual hand up, convener. Yep, just to say, it might help. I mean, if members visit the site, they will see it with their own eyes, so to speak. But if Bernard could just show a plan here just now, we do have quite a lot of information support of this application. There's a tree removals and retention plan. As you can see, there is none of the trees are protected by tree preservation order, for example. But this does show the layout of the site with tree planting and open space provided here, which might help members in their consideration. But if we're going to site, we'll have a better look at it there.
Thank you, Donald. We do appreciate you putting the photographs up, that maybe people like me that haven't got good vision would maybe need a pair of binoculars to have a look at that. But I believe Councillor Redmond wanted in here, then Councillor Kerr.
It was just a wee point about, well, this isn't quite there yet. I was looking at the block plan there, and I'm just thinking, parking wise, every house has got 2 spaces, but is it not normal, like developments I've seen before, where we have I know we've got a big turning circle here, but could we have maybe a couple additional parking spaces for visitors and things? I'm just thinking, 3-bedroom houses, if, I don't know, half the houses end up with their children get cars, or is there enough parking? I know that's maybe we're wanting to keep trees as well, but is there quite enough parking there as well? And also just when we, I know it's probably there, but environmental wise, like, is there anything these houses are doing to like meet what kind of net zero targets? Or are they going to be gas supplied, or are they going to be air source heat pumps? Or just a kind of thought I had.
2 good points. I'll come back to Mr. Campbell on that. You heard the points for Councillor Redmond. First one is on, is there sufficient car parking? And also the issue on climate change there, really. Thank you.
Yes, convener. Yep. In terms of parking, there was quite, as with a lot of aspects of this application, quite extensive consultation with their colleagues in roads. This is not going to be adopted. But if members want us to look at it further to see if there's any prospect of introducing additional parking, that'd be acceptable. I don't know whether my colleague Russell would like to pop in a couple of comments here. But in terms of technologies, the supporting statement confirmed that they would meet them, and we've got a proposed condition on the application, and perhaps the applicant would like to confirm that to members. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give the applicant an opportunity to come back on that one.
If I could, if it's okay, also maybe just address the first point regarding the parking as well. It's maybe not immediately clear from the block plan, but actually what we have provided is 2 parking spaces for every dwelling plus an additional 2 visitor spaces. It maybe just wasn't immediately apparent from the drawing. That's what's been provided. So we certainly did have the aspiration there would be some visitor parking within the layout. With regards to sustainability, yes, in the design and access statement which has been provided, we have got a statement in there which supports a move towards sustainability, and clearly as we go into the next level of preparation through building control and through the conditions of the application, certainly moving towards for instance, the Silver Label Active for sustainability through Section 7 of the building regs is something that would clearly be part of any future development, and certainly something that, for instance, we've shown the solar thermal panels on the roof as part of the application and so on. So yes, it's very much something that will be developed through the condition in line with all of the coming standards for energy and sustainability.
Okay, thanks for the response. Councillor Kerr, you wanted in?
Thanks, convener. I've several questions, but if we're going to sites, I'll leave it till we come back. But highlighting what you've already stated, convener, I've been asking for 5 years to get these drawings in the pack. It doesn't need to be the paper side, it can be in your member share, so you can have a look at the drawings And I know Mr. Dryden's told me numerous times that it's going to happen, but it hasn't. It makes it a lot easier when you're reading the papers. You try to look at that drawing there up on the board, you can't see it. But if you've got it in your members share one, you can look at it in detail in your members share. It doesn't need to be in the paper one, because paper and colour paper and whatever. But if it's in your members share, it's a lot easier to see all aspects of the application. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify where we are, we have a motion moved and seconded to go to sites, and just to confirm, Councillor Bowes, this will be an unaccompanied site visit.
It can't be on it. It's got to be officers there, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's not a full.
That's right. It's not a hearing.
Hearing.
Right. Okay. Just to clarify that position. Okay. The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody otherwise minded? We agreed to the motion. Agreed. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 7 on your agenda this morning: demolition of former hatchery building, erection of dwelling houses and siting of temporary residential accommodation, amendment to P200266 full at Hareburn Hatchery, Falkirk, for Mrs. Julie Haddo. The report is by Donald Campbell again, and it's pages 57 to 72 in your agenda papers. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you, Convener. I could probably do this one off by heart. I know we have a number of new members, but members that have sat in the committee previously that may be familiar with this one. This application hasn't been called to the planning committee by a member. It's before committee by dint of the fact that it is contrary to policy. Now, there is a bit of a story to tell here. So, Bernard, could you pop up the original conversion of barn? Does that come up? There we go. Yeah. Right, so this was the first iteration of an application, which was the conversion of the barn, and that was compliant with policy. So that was dealt with under delegated powers a number of years ago. Then if we go on to proposal 2, new build, Bernard, this ended up at planning committee because the applicants at the time who had bought the site had decided that rather than go with the original grant of permission, they went for demolition and the erection of a new dwelling house, what you can see here, and we recommended approval. It went to committee, got approved. Then a little time later, proposal 3, new build, Bernard, if you can do that. Same story. Again, they refined the proposal. Again, we considered that the material considerations outweighed the terms of the development plan, and that it was a better proposal than the original one. It sat comfortably within the site, at the surrounding area, and the design of the dwelling house was suitable for a rural location. As I understand it, the applicants have refined it further, in part due to costs, which brings us to proposed current application, which is before members today. Again, a dwelling which we consider is suitable within the rural area. We have a number of photographs that may assist. If Bernard could just run through these. It's in a remote rural location of the former hatchery. It's accessed from a track that leads on to classified roads. There you can see the condition of the barn at the moment. These were only taken last week. The access goes on to a classified road next to the former Bankrig open cast coal site. We have no issues with it. We acknowledge that it's contrary to policy. There's the access into the site there, and we recommend that planning permission be granted. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Could I say there was a vast improvement with the photographs at the end there? We could actually see. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to open it up for Councillor Kerr.
Can I just ask Donald a question? The convener says that it's in Falkirk. It's actually Muirhaven side, isn't it?
In terms of the ward, Councillor?
Yes.
Well, it's Upper Braes and it's at Hareburn Hatchery. It lies between California and Avonbridge.
All
Next
right,
to bank,
okay.
next to banks, the former banks, bank rig open cast coal site,
Yeah.
which was restored a number of years ago.
I would propose that we go with the officer's recommendations.
Happy to second.
Okay, we've got a motion moved by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Bowes to agree the recommendations contained within the report. Is there anybody otherwise minded? No, agreed. Thank you for that. That takes us to item 8 on your agenda papers this morning, construction of outbuilding retrospective at 7 Pearson Place, Denleyhead, Bonnybridge, for Mr. Graham Love. The report is by Ryan McDonough and it's pages 73 to 84, and I believe that Councillor Colley will be stepping out of this one because she has declared an interest initially. Councillor Murtagh, did you have something to say there?
No, I was just waving to.
Just waving. Oh well, we'll all wave back to you then. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Waving goodbye to Fiona. Okay then. Right, Ryan. Thank you very much, sir. Would you like to come forward with the report? You're on mute, Ryan.
Oh, is that me now?
That's you, fine. Thank
I'll
you.
just ask if Bernard would like to share the relevant photos for the application. So the application site is located within a residential cul-de-sac at Pearson Place within the settlement of Denilone Head. The application site consists of a detached 2-storey dwelling house with existing rear conservatory extension and associated garden ground to the front and rear of the property. The application site is located within the tree preservation area at Pearson Place. However, it should be noted that there are no protected trees located within the application site's boundary. As you can see here on these photos here, these are the trees that are as part of the tree preservation area. However, the application site itself is further up, as you can see, sort of the dark grey outbuilding at the rear there. So the application before committee is retrospective and relates to an outbuilding recently constructed in the rear garden of the property. The outbuilding is located along the boundary of the application site, which is flanked by Denny Road to the rear. As can be seen in the photos, there are numerous examples of rear outbuildings within gardens of neighbouring properties, as seen along Denny Road. It is acknowledged that the outbuilding is a relatively modern design, however the style of which is becoming more typical within residential gardens rather than a more traditional garden shed or greenhouse. It should be noted that the ground within the application site slopes downwards towards Denny Road. The slope has been accounted for the outbuilding at the rear section has been higher than the 2.5 metres allowed under permitted development regulation, which is in essence the reason why it's been before committee today. It should be noted that the sloping terrain of the rear garden means it would be likely that it would be constructed under permitted development regulations if the garden wasn't as sloping. So as stated in section 2 of the report, the application would usually be determined under delegated powers. However, in line with the Falkirk Council scheme of delegation, the application was called in by Councillor Colley, and thus the planning committee is required to determine the application. So in terms of our consultations, it was not considered appropriate to consult any internal or external bodies in respect of this application. It should be noted that our 2 representations of objection have been submitted on this application as summarised in section 6.1 of the report. These would be analysed by officers and discussed further between section 7b.6 and section 7b.14 of the report. So overall, it's considered that the proposal complies with the Falkirk Council Local Development Plan 2, in particular with policy HC08 residential extensions and alterations, as well as policy PE20 trees, woodland and hedgerows. Furthermore, the application is considered to comply with the non-statutory guidance contained within SG03, which falls alongside the local development plan. It's considered that there are no material considerations which would justify an officer's recommendation of the contrary. It is thus recommended that planning permission is approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. I'm happy to take any questions that members might have. Thank you.
Very much, Ryan, for your submission. Again, a vast improvement. Give members that don't know the area an opportunity to realise exactly what we're supposed to be voting on. Okay, I'm going to open it up for members. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Can I ask a wee bit, there's the recommendations here, number 1, the development hereby approved shall be implemented in accordance with the plan itemised in the informative below. So we're using an informative to grant planning permission. I thought an informative in itself was not binding.
Do you want to come back on that one for Ryan, or do you want Ryan to come in?
That condition is a sort of generic condition that we place in all sort of applications. The informatives in relation to a set of plans that have been submitted by the applicant in relation to the application. So the application plan submitted, if Bernard wants to show them, he's able to. However, they're not very detailed. Application plans they have to be acknowledged that they aren't very detailed. However, as you can see from the site photos, that the construction is easier to see. It's sometimes easier with retrospective applications because it's, in essence, the structure is there. So from their point of view, it's easier to assess. However, as you can see, that the drawings aren't very detailed at all. They're basically just sketches that the applicant has submitted. Yeah, but the condition in relation to that sort of a generic condition that we would place on sort of any applications.
Okay, thanks for that, Ryan. Gary?
Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm being a wee bit thick. I've only been on here for 5 years. It takes you time to learn it, doesn't it? So I'm assuming the informative is the horizontal slanted panels that are situated in the southern side of the elevation of the building shall remain in perpetuity unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority. Sorry, it's just that it's not entirely clear.
Yeah. No, sorry, that's another condition that we'd place in the application. So one of the main concerns with the application is in relation to overlooking. However, it overlooks into the rear garden ground. So if I don't know if Bernard can go back on those photos and just show the photo in relation to the slatting. So if you, in essence, this slatting that was, the structure didn't initially have the slatting, so we had suggested that slatting was placed on the side elevation, and therefore it severely restricts the view into the neighbouring property's garden. So in order to sort of improve that situation, we would ask that slatting remains in perpetuity unless otherwise agreed. So that's the slatting there, as you can see. So that's the condition in relation to that. Just ensuring that slatting remains. As you can see, it does severely limit the view into the neighbour's rear garden.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Bowes, anything else?
I'm still slightly, because that's now a condition, whereas they talk about an informative before. Maybe Mr. Dryden could
right, Ian, you want to come in?
Yeah, I have to come in to confirm that, Councillor Bowes. What's been given here, obviously, this is a retrospective application, but what has been assessed is that to address the issue of privacy, that you can still condition, and therefore the condition as part of the recommendation is a relevant planning condition that can be added over and above the structure that's already there, just to ensure that a degree of privacy is maintained to address the concerns that have been raised obviously by the neighbour. So it is competent to add the condition on as per the recommendation.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Bowes. Any other questions from anybody? I'm quite happy to move the recommendations contained within the report.
I'll second that.
Hey, thank you, Provost. So the recommendation contained within the report has been moved and seconded. Is there anybody otherwise minded? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Always remember, though, if I'm saying you agreed, and if you don't agree, put your hand up quick. Okay? No, good. Thank you. Councillor Colley has come back to us. Thank you, Councillor Colley. This takes us to item 9 on your agenda this morning, the Falkirk Council on-street parking space for disabled persons, various streets, number 4, order 20. The report is by Russell Steedman and it's pages 85 to 94 on your agenda papers. Russell, thank you and good morning.
Good morning, thank you, convener. I'm Russell Steedman, I'm the Roads Network Coordinator for anybody who doesn't know. This is a fairly straightforward situation as far as we're concerned. This is a disabled space for an eligible person in accordance with the Disabled Persons Parking Places Scotland Act. So you can see it's the location, proposed locations is shown on page 89, and there were 3 objections to the order. This is a traffic regulation order. One objection was the objections on paragraph 4.1. And one was withdrawn, and that's in paragraph 4.2. And the content of the objections and the Council's response to the objections in pages 91 to 94. Page 94 is probably quite good because it actually shows all the spaces in Strachan Street in Falkirk. And it shows there's a number of disabled bays already in there, and the light blue one is the one that's subject to this order, and the one that's coloured black has actually now been removed. That was a drawing that was produced in February, and that's now been removed. So it's over to members now to either agree to make the order or uphold the objections.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to open it up for members. Any members coming in? Are the members quite happy to move the recommendation? Councillor Colley, you get your hand up.
Yeah, I just actually did a quick question. I think obviously a number of the objections are about the person not having a car themselves or not driving, and relating to having a disabled parking bay, and I wondered, you know, because I'm aware that, for example, a family may be providing that support and having the blue badge to enable to take person to various places or indeed services, and I wondered how clear in general, just when an order is made, how clear in general it is that the person doesn't actually need to be able to be driving, but actually it's the provision of a blue badge. And I just wondered, bearing in mind it seems to be about approving this, or not, but that we can approve it without the person having a car themselves. Maybe is the information for the public clear enough? I don't even know that. I don't even know if I was clear enough saying that.
It's a very good point. It's been asked to me hundreds of times. Russell, would you like to come back and just clarify the legality in this issue?
Yes. This, I think the objector's got the wrong end of the stick. They're speaking about a different person actually. So this, in order to be an eligible person in terms of the Act, there has to be a vehicle registered to the address. And in this case, the applicant had a vehicle registered to their address. And it's as clear cut as that for us. They need to have a vehicle registered to the address. They don't have to be the driver, obviously. Vehicle registered address, have a blue badge. There has to be a convenient place for us to place a space on the road, and that's pretty much it, really. Hope that helps.
It does. Thank you. Councillor Kerr, you want to come in?
Just a couple of points for clarification, if possible. The B mark, even though this is for the occupant, am I right in saying, Russell, 1, 2, that would be 3, 4, 5, 6. These people can park in any of these bays because they're not specifically for those houses?
That is correct. Anybody with a blue badge can park in any of these bays.
Okay. And just an observation for the last one. In the last 5 years, I've never had an email to say that we're removing bays, which is nice to see this week, because there is people who have passed away, moved on, and I understand that unless the council get notification that these people aren't using them, it's hard to do. But it was really nice to get that notification this week to say we're removing this in these streets. So thank you very much.
We do what we call revocation orders for bays that are no longer required, and we do these once a quarter, I think now, and I've been doing them for years. Councillor Kerr.
Okay, thank you.
I've just not seen them, Russell.
Yeah, thanks for your input. Yeah, Councillor Steinwright.
Thank you to Councillor Colley, because that answered my first question. Just the second one, I do note the complaint on the 1st of February has been withdrawn, but the one submitted on the 27th of January this year has still maintained about the specific parking situation. What sort of enforcement and monitoring mechanisms can we put in place to make sure that those with blue badges are the only ones parking in those bays, especially as it is suggested by the first complaint especially on that street, knowing it in my ward, and I have had communication from people on that street before that that this might exacerbate the parking situation. What monitoring can we do, or what part of the council is responsible for that, just so that we can perhaps look at it in 3 or 4 months' time, especially on that street and groups of streets, to make sure that it is that people we're granting the blue badges to that are parking there properly. Cheers.
Thank you. Russell?
Yeah, I think from a practical perspective, it's just not practical to monitor every street. There are literally hundreds of blue badge spaces in the council area. What we do is, when we get reports that people are not displaying a blue badge in a blue badge space, then our parking attendants will visit the site and issue a penalty charge notice to anybody in a blue badge space without a blue badge.
Okay. You satisfied with that? I know you'll not be satisfied, but it's
No.
an answer for you.
Just a follow-up question. How do we encourage potentially reporting, especially on that street? It does, from my knowledge as well, there is a good culture in that sort of area of being quite diligent in the community and making sure, looking out for each other. But how do we sort of encourage those reporting mechanisms? Perhaps this is just my naivety as a new member. I'm just trying to make sure that we're quite clear before.
Well, we would encourage anybody who is concerned about if there's a vehicle not displaying a blue badge in a blue badge space, then they should report it to the council. And the web address to report it to is parking@falkirk.gov.uk.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Stainwright?
No, thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murtagh, do you want to come in at this stage?
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously, it's here because there's unresolved complaints, and but the criteria is met, so it's sort of on one hand a fairly straightforward matter. But and we come across this on many occasions where it's a street like this, where the concern of objectors is that by adding an additional space, obviously it limits additional parking, not because obviously people who are disabled need to park where they need to park, and I don't think most residents are not objecting to that, but that in the placement of it, sometimes then it can limit the space in between. And my question here, looking at the plan, which I think is very helpful, and thank officers for it, where the existing advisory bay is, the new bay in blue, to the right of that there's the existing bay in red, and it's whether in a sort of whether there's any scope, either officially or unofficially, to have discussions about the placement of bay. It wouldn't be a case that we could change where the existing bay would be, but it would seem like a pragmatic opportunity to perhaps have a discussion about where one of those other existing bays is and whether that could be moved closer, and therefore perhaps make the parking situation better overall for everybody in the street, including the disabled residents. I just wondered if there's any provision for the process on that, if a previously granted bay can be repositioned, and whether officers could comment on that, because I think in some ways that might be a helpful thing for the residents in the street.
Russell?
I think in an ideal world we would try to do that. I think we've got stuck here with, over the years, disabled bays getting put directly outside people's houses who have applied, and you end up getting stuck with not enough space in between. And it's, I think realistically, it's difficult to do, but I think we should be thinking about doing that, and I think we should do that in future.
Well, can I ask, maybe, because I know that Russell will be as committed to the concept of an ideal world as I am in my quest for perfection and equality. If it's something that we should be doing or could potentially be done, I know there's not a process for it just now, but could we maybe explore it? Could we? I mean, is there a way that officers could look into potentially even finding a way? Or I'm not asking for an official report or official whatever, but it would seem like an opportunity to maybe try to see if there was a possibility of doing that here.
No, I think we should. We do it just now normally. It looks. Right. I'm not saying these. There's no guarantee that these red dots and blue dots are exactly where it is on the site. I think on the site it's probably okay, actually. I think it's just the way the drawing's drawn.
Okay. I'm happy to. I agree with the moving of granting, but could, as part of that, could you request that maybe just officers could go in and double check to see if there was any strategic possibility of even slightly improving the repositioning? I think that residents would welcome that. I would think.
Yep, can do.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. That's a very valid point. Okay, then, members, anybody else want to come in at this stage? Are we all agreed to determine that the order should be made? We agreed? Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the committee. And first of all, could I say that thank you very much for your participation. And once again, it's your first meeting for a number of members. You'll get really, really good in the next few months as all these meetings come up. And the fact is that you may be sitting there and maybe you're maybe a wee bit apprehensive about coming forward or saying anything, but don't be. Don't be. You've got questions to ask.